Picture this. You're 35 years old. You've been married for 8 years. And you're sitting in your car in the driveway after another 12-hour workday. You don't want to go inside your own house. Your wife hasn't touched you in months. Your kids barely acknowledge your existence. And every conversation turns into a battle about something trivial. You work your ass off to provide for this family. Yet somehow, you're treated like an unwelcome guest in your own home. You ask yourself, how did I get here? I thought marriage was supposed to make me happy. I thought this was what success looked like. What if I told you that this scenario isn't an exception? It's the norm. What if I told you that the modern institution of marriage has been systematically designed to destroy men's happiness, drain their resources, and eliminate their authority? And what if I told you that the smartest thing you could do as a man in today's world is to never get married at all? Today, I'm going to reveal the brutal truth about why marriage is a losing proposition for men in the 21st century. I'm going to show you how society has transformed marriage from a partnership into a prison. And why the men who are avoiding marriage entirely are actually the smartest ones in the room. This isn't going to be comfortable to hear, especially if you're already married or planning to get married. But if you want to protect your happiness, your resources, and your sanity, you need to understand these truths. The men who ignore this advice are the ones who end up divorced, bankrupt, and broken. The men who understand what I'm about to tell you are the ones who maintain their freedom, their wealth, and their peace of mind. Pay attention, because what you're about to learn could save you from the biggest mistake of your life. Let me start with the most fundamental problem with modern marriage. It transforms men into worker drones. This isn't hyperbole. This is exactly what happens to the majority of married men in today's society. Here's the modern marriage formula. You wake up at 6 a.m., go to work for 8 to 10 hours, come home exhausted, and then you're expected to immediately switch into household helper mode. You're expected to clean, cook, do laundry, help with homework, and handle all the household maintenance. Meanwhile, there's no meal prepared for you, no appreciation for your efforts, and certainly no authority over any household decisions. You've essentially become a live-in employee in your own home. You're working 2 full-time jobs, one at the office and one at home, while receiving none of the benefits that marriages traditionally provided to men. Think about this logically. In the past, marriage was a partnership where both parties brought specific value to the relationship. The man provided resources and protection, while the woman provided domestic support and nurturance. Both roles were respected and necessary. But modern marriage has eliminated the female role while doubling the male role. You're still expected to be the primary breadwinner. But now you're also expected to be the co-housekeeper, co-parent, and emotional support system. Meanwhile, your wife is free to pursue her own career, her own interests, and her own goals without any obligation to support you in return. This is why so many married men report feeling exhausted, unappreciated, and resentful. They're not bad men. They're men who have been tricked into accepting a fundamentally unfair arrangement. Here's a psychological truth that society refuses to acknowledge. Men need respect like they need oxygen. This isn't optional, it's hardwired into male psychology. When a man doesn't feel respected, he begins to deteriorate emotionally, mentally, and even physically. This is why men work so hard to achieve success in their careers. It's why men desire money, status symbols, and positions of authority. It's not about simple materialism. It's about earning respect from their peers and their environment. But here's the cruel irony. The very institution that's supposed to provide men with the most respect, marriage, has become the place where they receive the least. In a typical modern marriage, the man's opinions are casually dismissed, his decisions are questioned, and his authority is undermined at every turn. He's treated like a child who needs constant supervision rather than a partner whose judgment is valued. Let me give you a concrete example that happens in millions of homes every single day. A man works 60 hours a week, sacrificing his time and energy to afford a nice home and comfortable life for his family. When he comes home and suggests that perhaps they should reconsider a major purchase to avoid financial strain, his wife rolls her eyes and tells him he simply doesn't understand the family's needs. His decades of life experience and his role as the primary provider count for absolutely nothing in this conversation. This dynamic is so common that most people don't even recognize it as disrespectful. But imagine if you treated your boss this way at work, or if you treated a customer this way in business. You'd be fired immediately because everyone understands that respect is a necessary foundation for any functional relationship. Yet somehow in marriage, disrespecting your husband has become not just acceptable but expected. Women are encouraged by society to stand up to their husbands, to not let him control you, and to make your own decisions. All of this is thinly veiled code for disrespect your husband whenever you feel like it. Modern society has engaged in what I call the authority elimination project, a systematic, deliberate effort to remove all male authority from the household. This isn't accidental. It's been programmed into our culture through media, education, and social conditioning. Turn on any television show or movie, and you'll see the same destructive pattern repeated endlessly. The father is portrayed as a bumbling, incompetent idiot who can't be trusted with basic decisions, while the mother is the smart, capable one who has to clean up all his messes. This programming is so pervasive that most people don't even notice it anymore. The message is clear. Men are too stupid, too selfish, and too incompetent to have any real authority in their own homes. The woman must be the final decision maker on everything from finances to child rearing to household management. But here's what this programming conveniently ignores. Authority isn't about domination, it's about responsibility. What benefits does modern marriage offer men? Having children, which you can have without marriage. Social approval, which lasts about 5 minutes. 50% of your assets if the marriage fails. Potential alimony payments for years or decades. Loss of authority in your own home. Decreased sexual intimacy. Increased stress and responsibility. Limited freedom and flexibility. Potential loss of access to your children if divorced. When you look at this objectively, what rational man would sign up for this deal? You're essentially agreeing to give up your freedom, your authority, and potentially half your wealth in exchange for what? Exactly? The traditional benefits of marriage, domestic support, sexual exclusivity, and social stability, have been systematically eliminated while all the costs and risks have been amplified. It's like agreeing to buy a car that comes with no engine, no warranty, and a payment plan that lasts forever. This is why marriage rates are plummeting among educated, successful men. They're not afraid of commitment. They're smart enough to recognize a bad deal when they see one. One of the most devastating aspects of modern marriage is the widespread phenomenon of sexless marriages. Statistics show that anywhere from 20% to 40% of marriages are essentially sexless, with couples having intimate relations less than 10 times per year. Think about the psychological impact of this on men. You commit your life to one woman, giving up all other options. And then she gradually withdraws the very thing that motivated you to make that commitment in the first place. This isn't just about physical needs, it's about feeling desired and appreciated. When your wife stops showing sexual interest in you, it sends a clear message that you're not attractive, not desirable, and not worth the effort. It's a form of rejection that cuts to the core of male identity. But here's the cruel twist. You're not allowed to seek that validation elsewhere. You're trapped in a situation where your needs aren't being met, but you're forbidden from meeting them anywhere else. You're essentially sentenced to a life of sexual frustration and emotional rejection. Many men try to address this by communicating their needs, being more romantic, or even going to counseling. But these efforts rarely work because the underlying problem isn't communication. It's the fundamental structure of modern marriage that eliminates women's incentive to maintain attraction and effort. When women have complete security and know that their husband can't easily leave, they often stop putting in the effort that attraction requires. Why would they? They already have everything they want: financial security, social status, and emotional support, without having to maintain their end of the bargain. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of this situation is how thoroughly society has programmed both men and women to accept this dysfunctional arrangement. This programming begins in childhood and continues through every aspect of our culture. In schools, boys are taught that masculinity is toxic and that they need to suppress their natural instincts for leadership and authority. They're told that wanting respect is outdated and that they should be happy just to serve others without recognition. The media reinforces this programming by consistently portraying traditional masculinity as villainous and men who want authority as abusive. Any man who expects respect from his wife is labeled as controlling or misogynistic. Even our legal system has been designed to support this programming. Family courts almost always side with women in custody disputes. Divorce settlements favor women regardless of circumstances. And domestic violence laws are written in ways that assume men are always the aggressors. This programming is so effective that most men don't even realize they're being manipulated. They accept disrespect as normal. They apologize for having needs. And they feel guilty for wanting to be treated well in their own homes. The result is a generation of men who have been psychologically castrated. They go through life accepting less than they deserve because they've been convinced that expecting more makes them bad people. Here's a psychological truth that few people understand. Chronic disrespect creates clinical depression in men. This isn't just feeling sad. This is a serious mental health condition that can lead to suicide, addiction, and violent behavior. When a man is consistently treated without respect, his brain begins to shut down. He loses motivation, energy, and hope. He starts to question his own worth and competence. Over time, this psychological abuse creates the same symptoms as major depression. This is why domestic violence statistics are so misleading. They focus on physical abuse while ignoring the psychological destruction that chronic disrespect causes. A man who is constantly belittled, dismissed, and undermined by his wife is experiencing abuse, even if she never lays a hand on him. The most tragic part is that society not only ignores this form of abuse, it encourages it. Women are taught that disrespecting their husbands is empowerment, and that men who want respect are fragile or insecure. But the reality is that disrespect is incredibly damaging to the human psyche. It's what drives men to extreme behaviors, addiction, and even violence. When you systematically destroy a man's sense of worth and dignity, you're playing with psychological dynamite. This is why so many married men report feeling depressed, anxious, and hopeless. They're not weak. They're human beings who are being subjected to psychological torture in their own homes. When men find themselves in these disrespectful, authority-less marriages, they typically respond in one of three ways: fight, flight, or freeze. Fight response. Some men try to assert their authority through conflict. They argue, demand respect, and try to establish boundaries. This usually backfires because society has labeled any attempt at male authority as abusive or controlling. These men often end up in divorce court being portrayed as the villain. Flight response. Other men simply leave. They walk away from the marriage, sometimes abandoning their children and responsibilities. Society condemns these men as deadbeats. But often they're just men who couldn't handle the psychological abuse anymore. Freeze response. The majority of men choose to freeze. They shut down emotionally, stop fighting for respect, and just endure the situation. They become shells of their former selves, going through the motions of marriage while dying inside. None of these responses are healthy, but they're all predictable reactions to an impossible situation. When you put a man in a position where he has no authority, no respect, and no easy escape, you're going to get one of these three responses. The tragedy is that society blames men for all three responses instead of recognizing that the system itself is broken. Men are criticized for fighting back, condemned for leaving, and mocked for giving up. There's literally no response that's considered acceptable. Here's the most frustrating part of this entire situation. The solution is incredibly simple. But nobody wants to implement it. Making a man happy in marriage requires nothing more than basic respect and appreciation. A woman could transform her marriage overnight by doing simple things like asking her husband's opinion on decisions, thanking him for his efforts, speaking to him respectfully in public, acknowledging his contributions to the family, and showing physical affection and attraction. These aren't revolutionary concepts, they're basic human courtesy. But they've become so rare in modern marriages that when they do occur, men are shocked and grateful. The reason these simple solutions aren't implemented is because they require women to acknowledge men's value and treat them with respect. But current social programming tells women that respecting their husbands is submissive, and that they should never acknowledge male authority or contribution. So instead of implementing simple solutions that would make everyone happier, we continue with a system that makes men miserable, drives them away from marriage, and ultimately destroys families. Here's a stark illustration of how broken the system has become. Many married men report getting more respect and appreciation from strangers than from their own wives. This includes everything from service workers to, yes, even strippers. Think about the psychological impact of this. A man can spend money on a stripper and receive more genuine smiles, appreciation, and positive attention than he gets from the woman he's committed his life to. The stripper thanks him, treats him well, and makes him feel valued. Meanwhile, his wife criticizes him, dismisses his efforts, and treats him like an annoyance. This isn't a comparison anyone should have to make, but it illustrates just how far marriage has fallen. When men are getting better treatment from sex workers than from their spouses, something is fundamentally wrong with the institution. The stripper doesn't love the man, but she treats him with basic respect because she understands that respect is necessary for a functional interaction. The wife claims to love the man, but she treats him worse than she would treat a stranger because she takes his commitment for granted. This paradox reveals the core problem with modern marriage. It removes women's incentive to treat men well while trapping men in situations where they have no alternatives. The psychological damage caused by disrespectful marriages is creating a mental health crisis among men that society refuses to acknowledge. Suicide rates among middle-aged men have skyrocketed, and many of these suicides are directly related to marital problems and feelings of worthlessness. When you systematically destroy a man's sense of purpose, authority, and value, you're creating the perfect conditions for depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. Men who once felt confident and capable become shadows of themselves, questioning their worth and their place in the world. This crisis is compounded by the fact that men are discouraged from seeking help or expressing their feelings. They're told to man up and deal with their problems silently while simultaneously being stripped of all the traditional sources of male strength and identity. The result is a generation of men who are suffering in silence, medicating their pain with alcohol, drugs, or other destructive behaviors. They're not weak. They're human beings who are being psychologically destroyed by a system that was supposed to support them. Beyond the emotional and psychological costs, marriage poses enormous financial risks to men. In the event of a divorce, men typically lose 50% of their assets accumulated during marriage, their home, awarded to the wife in most cases, substantial monthly alimony payments, child support payments, even with joint custody, retirement savings and investments, often their career prospects due to the stress and time demands of divorce. Meanwhile, they're often forced to maintain the same standard of living for their ex-wife while drastically reducing their own living situation. Many divorced men end up living in small apartments while continuing to pay for the family home they can no longer live in. The financial devastation is so severe that many men never recover. They spend the rest of their lives paying for a marriage that failed while their ex-wives move on to new relationships with their financial security intact. This financial risk alone makes marriage a terrible deal for men. But when combined with all the other costs and risks, it becomes completely irrational from a financial planning perspective. One of the most devastating aspects of modern marriage is how children are often used as weapons against men. Despite paying child support and wanting to be involved in their children's lives, many divorced fathers find themselves marginalized and excluded from important decisions. Family courts typically award primary custody to mothers, regardless of which parent is better suited to raise the children. Fathers become weekend visitors in their children's lives while being financially responsible for their upbringing. This system incentivizes women to initiate divorce because they know they'll maintain control over the children while receiving financial support. It also gives them tremendous power to manipulate men by threatening to limit access to their children. The psychological impact on men who lose daily contact with their children is devastating. They're forced to watch their children grow up from a distance while being powerless to protect them or guide them through life's challenges. Society has created a trap where men are damned if they do and damned if they don't when it comes to marriage. If you get married and it fails, you're blamed for not being a good enough husband. If you choose not to get married, you're labeled as commitment phobic or afraid of responsibility. This social pressure forces many men into marriages they don't really want, leading to predictable negative outcomes. Men who would be perfectly happy remaining single are shamed into commitments that ultimately make them miserable. The reality is that many men are simply not suited for the demands of modern marriage. They would be happier, more productive, and more fulfilled if they were free to focus on their careers, hobbies, and personal development without the constant stress and conflict of a dysfunctional marriage. But society refuses to acknowledge that marriage isn't right for everyone, particularly in its current form. Instead, it continues to push men toward an institution that serves women's interests while destroying men's happiness and well-being. The men who choose to remain unmarried are not missing out. They're making a smart choice that allows them to maximize their happiness and potential. Single men have complete control over their time and energy, the ability to pursue their goals without interference, financial freedom to invest in themselves and their future, the option to date multiple women without commitment, no risk of losing half their assets to divorce, and the freedom to relocate, change careers, or take risks. They gain peace of mind, knowing they can't be trapped in a bad situation. This doesn't mean avoiding relationships entirely. It means avoiding the legal and social trap of marriage while maintaining the freedom to connect with women on your own terms. Many successful men have discovered that they can have meaningful relationships, great sex, and emotional fulfillment without signing a marriage contract. They can enjoy the benefits of female companionship while maintaining their autonomy and protecting their resources. From a biological perspective, men are not designed for monogamy in the way that modern marriage demands. Throughout human history, successful men have had multiple partners, and this polygamous instinct is still present in male psychology. Modern marriage forces men to suppress their natural desires and commit to one woman for life. Often when that woman is no longer putting in the effort to remain attractive or desirable. This creates internal conflict and frustration that leads to infidelity, divorce, or lifelong unhappiness. The men who understand this biological reality and choose to work with it rather than against it are often happier and more fulfilled. They can have variety in their romantic lives while avoiding the psychological prison of forced monogamy. From an economic standpoint, marriage is one of the worst investments a man can make. The return on investment is negative. The risk is enormous, and the opportunity cost is massive. A man who remains single can invest his money in his career, his education, his health, and his future. He can take risks, start businesses, and build wealth without having to consider the needs and opinions of a spouse who might not share his vision. The money that married men spend on weddings, larger homes, family vacations, and eventually divorce lawyers could be invested in assets that actually appreciate in value. The time and energy spent managing a difficult marriage could be channeled into productive pursuits that create lasting value. When you look at the most successful men in history, many of them either never married or married late in life after they had already achieved their goals. They understood that marriage can be a distraction from greatness, not a path to it. The harsh reality is that modern women are not prepared for, or interested in, being good wives. They've been taught to prioritize their careers, their independence, and their personal fulfillment over their relationships and families. This isn't necessarily their fault. It's the result of decades of social programming that told them marriage was oppressive and that they should focus on competing with men rather than complementing them. But the result is a generation of women who lack the skills, mindset, and motivation to create successful marriages. Modern women often view marriage as a way to secure financial stability and social status, rather than as a partnership where they contribute value. They expect men to adapt to their needs while offering little in return beyond their presence. The women who do understand how to create successful marriages are increasingly rare. And they're usually claimed by men who understand their value early in life. The average man entering the dating market today is unlikely to find a woman who will make marriage worthwhile. After examining all the evidence, the psychological costs, the financial risks, the social programming, the lack of incentives, and the fundamental unfairness of the modern marriage contract, the conclusion is clear. Marriage is a losing proposition for men in the 21st century. The institution that was once designed to benefit both parties has been transformed into a system that serves women's interests while destroying men's happiness, wealth, and freedom. The smart money is on avoiding marriage entirely and creating a life that maximizes your potential without the constraints and risks of legal commitment. This doesn't mean you can't have relationships, love, or companionship. It means you can have all these things without signing a contract that gives someone else the power to destroy your life whenever they choose to exercise it. The men who understand this truth and act on it are the ones who will thrive in the modern world. They'll have the freedom to pursue their goals, the resources to invest in their future, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing they can't be trapped in a situation that makes them miserable. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. You can continue to believe in the fairy tale of marriage that society is selling. Or you can accept the reality of what marriage has become and make decisions that serve your best interests. The men who choose wisely will thank themselves for the rest of their lives. The men who ignore this advice will pay the price for decades to come. Your life, your freedom, and your happiness are too valuable to gamble on an institution that's designed to work against you. Choose wisely.